So originally, I was going to title this video, Why the Lord of the Rings Trilogy is Better than the Hobbit Trilogy. And then I realized that video would be 3 seconds long. Ready? Make the Hobbit Trilogy shorter. Okay, but in all seriousness, while that is one of the problems of the Hobbit Trilogy, I do think that there are some more things to be discussed that underlie why the Hobbit Trilogy is good, but could be better. Before I continue, if you haven't subscribed and joined the Access Blockbusters crew, please make sure to do so. Give this video a like and let me know in the comments down below. Do you actually prefer the Hobbit Trilogy? Do you like the movies at all? Please make sure to do so in the comments down below. I would love to hear your guys' feedback. Alright, so it's no secret that the Hobbit Trilogy is, in general, much more maligned than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Not as many people like it, not nearly as much. And I've had conversations with many Lord of the Rings fans, many people who say that Middle-earth is their favorite place in fictional genre storytelling. And I absolutely love Middle-earth. I love the Lord of the Rings films. I just recently rewatched them actually, and they are fantastic. However, then Peter Jackson, who directed the original Lord of the Rings trilogies, decided to come back and direct an adaptation of The Hobbit, which I was very excited for because I love the book The Hobbit. And then he decided to make it 3 movies, and everyone kind of went, wait, you're telling me that this Hobbit book, which is, I think, shorter than all of the Lord of the Rings books individually, is going to be turned into a trilogy? But why? And then the movies came out, and I actually enjoyed them. I legitimately enjoyed all 3 films. And I know I'm in the minority on this. I've had conversations with many people, and I say, yeah, I like the Hobbit films. They look at me as if I'm crazy. They look at me as if I said, Jar Jar Binks is my favorite character in Star Wars, which I have heard from some people. No judgments here. And yet even I acknowledge that while I do very much enjoy the Hobbit films, there is something left to be desired from them. And I was wondering, why? What is it? I mean, obviously, yes, you can shorten the Hobbit trilogy down in 1 or 2 films, and it would be a lot better. But it's not quite that simple. And so in today's video, I want to discuss why the Hobbit trilogy didn't work and what we can do to fix it to make it even better and maybe up to the standards of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Maybe. And I want to get specific here. These are going to be specific changes that I would want to make. So here we go. Number 1, the most obvious one in my opinion, get rid of the love triangle between the dwarf and the elf. Evangeline Lilly, I'm sorry, she's a great actress for sure, but she didn't need to be in the film at all. And the reason that she was in the film, obviously, is because they were making 3 films. They realized, well, we're making 3 entire feature-length films, but we have to put in filler because this one Hobbit book is not gonna fill up 3 movies. So what did they do? They got Legolas back, and they brought in Evangeline Lilly as Tauriel, and they decided to make this weird love triangle between those 2 and a dwarf. Okay, no. Just cut that out entirely. Second thing is the obvious, also, make it 2 films, not 3. And by 2 films, I mean 2 regular films, like 2.5-hour length films. Because look, I know the Lord of the Rings special editions were about 4.5 hours long each, and I understand because the books are dense. The books have so much rich mythology in them that the theatrical cuts couldn't be that long. And you're taking The Hobbit, which is a little bit shorter than the Lord of the Rings books, which is still pretty lengthy and pretty dense. And I can see that being a 4-hour length film akin to one extended edition of the Lord of the Rings film. So to me, 2 films isn't actually egregious, and in fact, that was the actual plan before they decided to make it a trilogy. And I think by making it 2 films, you can have 2 distinct arcs. And that leads me to my next point. There are 2 distinct arcs in the Hobbit book that can and should be adapted in these 2 films. One is the journey to take back Erebor and defeat Smaug, and the other could be also the Battle of the 5 Armies. Now granted, I don't think the Battle of the 5 Armies needs to be dragged on for an entire film, but I think that if you're building up the first film, and you have this plot of trying to take back Erebor, and you end the first film with the dwarves maybe taking back the mountain, then you can set up this entire other subplot of the lake town, and you can set up the entire subplot of the actual battle that goes on, the politics of taking back the mountain, what happens next, because that is, while not necessarily as expanded on in the books as it is in the original trilogy, it is still a very important part of the books. Number 3 is focus on Bilbo. I think amongst all of the subplots and things that they added into the Hobbit trilogy, one of the things that I thought was missing that was so strong in the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the focus on the main character. In The Lord of the Rings, you know, Frodo is the protagonist. Even though there is the whole company of the Fellowship of the Ring, you have Aragorn, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Boromir, and yet the focus remains on Frodo. I felt like when we were watching the Hobbit films that the focus wasn't always on Bilbo when it should have been. And they did some good things there. They made some character development choices. His interactions with the dwarves are very nice. Him taking the Arkenstone and being the one to do the right thing even though he was betraying Thorin, I thought that was all good. I just felt like there was some parts missing where they decided to focus more on Thorin rather than Bilbo. This is the Hobbit trilogy, and I understand that Thorin is a very important character, but I think that at the end of the day, Thorin's character development should be supplementary to Bilbo's, and sometimes it really felt like Thorin's trilogy, not Bilbo's. Number 4, don't let visual style overpower the story. At the end of The Return of the King, when Aragorn is about to charge and make his last stand he's about to make his last stand with the armies as he's about to fight for the protection of Middle-earth and for Frodo, it is not the actual spectacle that stands out to me. It is this line.
For Frodo.
And that line says so much. It says everything about what the Lord of the Rings trilogy was. It had a focus, and the focus was not visual spectacle, even though the visual spectacle was brilliant. But the visuals came second to the story. The story was about Frodo and the ring. The problem with The Hobbit, especially the Battle of the Five Armies, is that the visuals were the main foundational pillar of that film. And you should never do that in a film because the visuals can look as great as they possibly can, and yet if there's no story, it becomes empty noise after a while. And lastly, and I think the most important thing that Peter Jackson forgot to do when making the Hobbit trilogy is simply this. You don't have to be the Lord of the Rings to be good. In fact, you probably shouldn't aspire to be the Lord of the Rings to be good, because The Hobbit is a different book than any of the individual Lord of the Rings trilogy books. And I think that Peter Jackson's mistake when returning to Middle-earth was that he wanted to replicate the success of the Lord of the Rings trilogy so much that he ended up making something hollow and not true to the actual Hobbit books. I believe that there are 2 excellent Hobbit films in that mess of a trilogy. And yes, I enjoy the films very much, but at certain points it feels bogged down, it feels messy, and it feels like Peter Jackson is really just trying to recapture the spectacle and the scope of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which you just can't do because The Hobbit is a different book than The Lord of the Rings. It's much smaller in scale than the grandiose battles of Middle-earth in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And at the end of the day, I think the fatal flaw here is simply that Peter Jackson tried to make the Lord of the Rings again, and he found that he couldn't do it. And even as someone who enjoys the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogy, I understand that the Hobbit trilogy left something to be desired, even though there are still good films in there. But those are just my thoughts on the Hobbit trilogy and how to make them better. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you like the Hobbit trilogy? Do you not like them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed already, then please make sure to do so and join the Access Blockbusters crew. Give this video a like, and if you want to check out some more videos, check out the videos on the screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.